4, 3, 2, 1. So good evening, everyone. We are calling our February 22nd LCAAC meeting to order at 6:31. We have established quorum, and thank you everyone for muting when we're not speaking. So for attendance, for roll call, we're going to go through that. The secretary has also requested just the correct spelling of your name into the chat for him as well, but we'll go through to make sure that everyone also has the audio capability is fine. Brian Benavides.
Present.
Excellent. Ann Dameron.
Present.
Thank you. It's also a speed test, Anne, that you didn't know that too. Kevin Ching.
Yeah, Kevin. Yes, Kevin's here.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Devanshi.
Present.
Great. Nishi. Nishi Bhagat. Okay, not yet. Yen Chen.
Present.
Great. Divya.
Present.
Excellent. Calvin. Calvin Hearns. Okay, not yet. Anna Shipper.
Present.
Excellent. Twisha. Not yet, Twisha. Okay. Marinelle. I don't think so yet, Marinelle. Okay. Crystal.
Present.
Thank you, Crystal. Gabriella. I don't think I see Gabriella yet. Larona. I don't think you saw Larona yet either. Okay. Well, Michael.
Present.
Excellent. Ivy Wu.
Here.
Wonderful. All right. And then we have our non-voting staff members. Mr. Musto.
Present.
Leticia Salinas.
Present.
Marcus Battle.
Here.
Excellent. Diane Jones.
Here.
And Trustee Campbell. Okay, so no Trustee Campbell yet. Okay. All right, so we'll check back in and we'll do a reminder for our secretary too, if anyone joins us late, that we can get those folks in. But we do have quorum, so we are good to move on that. So to go ahead and
Gloria,
oh yes,
we do have a couple other staff members present, Mr. Abbasi and Miss Sert.
oh, thank you. Yes, so Ms. Sert will also be presenting. So we'll have both of them noted as well for the presentation. Thank you so much, Anne.
You're welcome.
And just the names that I currently have from the chat is, and I'm just going to read the first names: Crystal, Brian, me, Logan, Anna, Diana, Letty, Divya, and Robin. So anyone whose name I didn't call, if you could put it in the chat, it'll make the notes easier for me. And that includes you, Victoria.
Excellent, will do. Okay. Letty, do we have anyone who submitted public comment?
No public comment tonight.
Okay. All right. So we're moving on then to approve our minutes from January. We did get you access to those right after the agenda was sent out. So if there's anyone who needed any amendments made, or if we have anyone who is still not able to access, we have in the past moved this to a future agenda item, but anyone who's comfortable that's read that and then has any corrections, now would be the time. If you wanted to go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in, and then we can note any corrections that need to be made to that January 11th set of minutes. Okay, so I'm seeing However, if you have objection to approving minutes because of either because of content or because you'd prefer to wait until next time, now would also be the time to voice that. Anyone with objection to approving the January minutes? All right, so seeing no objection, we have approved the January 11th minutes. So we're going to go ahead now and move on to our expenditure report. So we have, let's see, Letty, did we want to go ahead and I can present that if that's something that we want to be able to show.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And then we can go item by item. That would be great.
Okay. All right. So we'll, this is linked in your agenda. Hopefully that will come up okay, and we'll zoom in a bunch. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to kind of just go through, we're going to do two things here at once. One, we're going to be able to ask questions since we have Marcus and Rais here this evening. So if we have any questions or clarifications on the expenditures. The other thing that we want you to let us know, and then Letty, if you can mark this as we go through, we want to kind of tag specific actions that we want to have further discussion about. And that would mean something that we might want to revisit to reframe or to eliminate, or if you want to look at spending significantly more money in a certain area, then you would also voice that that's an area of interest for you. If it's something that the allocations or the actuals that we've expended is pretty much in line, when you hear what it's being spent on, all of that seems fine and you're good with that status quo, then we won't tag that item. And when we work on presenting, moving forward to approve for next year's, then we would kind of keep that dollar amount the same and the goal and the action the same. But we won't get into a lot of discussion on the carryover. But we're focusing on the financials, but at the same time, since you're hearing what it's being spent on, it's a good time for you to also voice that you do want to come back for further discussion. So you also had another document that I sent out yesterday, because that is a comparison document that had slightly different allocations than are noted here in the left-hand column. So I'm going to just, for the purposes, now that we have Marcus here, it's good for the committee and the public to know that LCAAC is just an advisory body, like most of the committees for our district. So it's kind of a two-way street. We can provide recommendations and counsel to the school board, and then the school board can also take some of our recommendations. They can change some of the recommendations. It can then push things through staff and have us incorporate things into the LCAP as well. And we continue to work with that. So Marcus, I'm going to have you expound a little bit on this, but some of the dollar amount changes that may be different from what you were seeing last year is that the district, as we reach the summer, they might be changing allocations so that they can most effectively spend money that they believe is still in line with the spirit of how LCAAC has advised. So that can explain some of those smaller discrepancies. Now, smaller could still be $50,000 or $100,000, but that's kind of why you won't see the exact same dollar amount between the two documents that you're looking at. Marcus, did you want to go ahead and add to that? And then I'll take a couple of questions before we start going through.
Yeah, you have a couple of raised hands, Ivy and then Letty.
Thanks. I'm going to have Marcus just clarify or add on to what I said first, and then we'll go ahead and take questions.
No, as you said, as we get close to the end of the year, and I know last year, in the previous year, we've gotten close to the year and this group has met, and based on the projection of how much money we would have available, decisions about how you want that money spent, and those adjustments are reflected at the end of the year, and sometimes based on the amount of expenses, and when they're closing the books, and just looking at this, it looked like we did have more expenses, but I know some of these were based on decisions that this group made. But I'll defer to, I know Rice is on here. Rice, you have any specific comments you'd like to make regarding?
Marcus, you said everything very eloquently, that this is a living document and the LCAP program is a living program. So as we go through the process, as we recalculate our revenues, and our goals and actions also may be adjusted based on ground realities, because sometimes due to many reasons, expenditures can be moved around or readjusted based on the approval from Board of Education or this committee. So that has been an ongoing process, and that continues from the adoption until we close our books. Just one more thing to add is last year was very unusual. It was extremely different because of COVID closure. Many of the goals and actions that should have been implemented, they had different scenarios for expenditures. So that kept us on our toes throughout the year last year.
Awesome. Thank you, Rice. Okay, so Letty, did you want to say any more? And then we'll go to committee member questions.
Yes, and just to let everyone know, later on in the agenda, Mr. Musto is going to share about the input we're in the midst of doing right now with an LCAP survey to the broader parent community, and then also he'll share how we'll get more input from the different schools, especially particularly the high need schools.
Awesome. All right, Ivy.
Okay, I have several questions. So am I understanding you correctly that what we decided to allocate can be changed depending on the circumstances? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes. So as an advisory body, we do that ongoing work and take the input that staff has gotten from the community, and we continue to try to embed that. But as Rice explained, the idea of it being not only a living document itself, but the programs that we can implement and the costs as staff continues to monitor how the expenditures are looking. And we'll get an update next month on what we've spent so far. And actually the last couple years, staff has gotten even more of our input on how to spend some things that were really underspent so that we could reallocate ourselves. But there are limitations to our meeting times and staff making sure that they still spend the money for our students in the way that they should. But yes, it is only an advisory body. And in fact, the school board could receive our presentation and they could say, thank you very much. We actually have our own ideas, and they could spend 7 hours up there and redo the whole thing. And that would be totally in line with their abilities as the governing body for this district.
So for us, I mean, as an advisory body, we don't really have much to say about how much dollars should be allocated. So it's, for example, for two of them, like G3A10, G4A1, the amount allocated is substantially much larger than what we agreed to. Okay, and that's, so I'm just trying to understand, because this is my, I guess, second year now on LCAP. So basically our function is just to decide the goals. But then as to the dollar amount, we don't really have any saying over how much should be allocated.
So staff does the best job that they can in estimating the costs of the programs and services that this committee has said that they value.
Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, but then I do have another question. I just want to understand what exactly we should be doing as the advisory committee. Another question is, if we we changed the allocation amount from actually originally $13.6 million to $16.7 million. So we increased the allocation, but then, so that's where do we get the money to support the increase in funding?
So Ivy, the committee didn't increase the allocation. We received information that the state did not slash the funding by 10 or so % that they had said that they were going to. So that's how we knew that our committee was still looking at about $16 million instead of the 14 or so million that we had thought before. We do not control getting more or less money. We can certainly say on certain goals, we not only want to spend some LCAP money on this, but we also want to have it fully funded, and we recommend that general fund dollars, for example, for another $8 million, we want to do XYZ. We can recommend anything that we want, but we don't have there's no power to control how the school board handles those recommendations.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, okay, we had a certain dollar amount to work on, and then the dollar amount has increased, and then I guess that's because we got more funding from the state for some reason. So staff made a decision to go ahead and use that extra funding for or the board approved projects or something. So that's what I'm trying to understand. So basically, that's how
I don't think last year, now Marcus Reyes, correct me if I'm wrong, last year wasn't the year we were changing the amount of money. It was the convening that we had done back in the spring. We had thought that for this upcoming 2021 school year, we were going to see a lowered amount. So we adjusted our budget accordingly for the 2021 school year. But for the
2019 to 2020 right now. That's a dollar amount I'm talking about. See, that was the question I share with the entire group. 2019 to 2020, and then the numbers are much different from what we worked on. And then I know that for 2020 and 2021 we have LCP, and how is that dollar amount played into this? I mean, we're looking at this chart, but I'm not sure what exactly we're supposed to do with this chart.
Okay.
And how is
so
it applied?
Yeah, so I think going item by item, like for example, some technology is showing $0 there, but we used LCP. So I think a little bit of that will get colored as we move along. So we'll get to some of those individual questions, and hopefully you can compare then with your grid as we go through. And then it'll hopefully flesh itself out a little bit better, if that makes sense, Ivy. But we'll definitely take more questions on specific items, and then I think continuing this conversation maybe at the end will help a little bit too.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivy. Divya?
A few questions. Actually, some of those were already asked by Ivy. This is my first year with the LCAAC committee, so I'm not sure what the numbers were from the previous year. So I do not know how the comparison goes. But by looking at this sheet, my questions are that whatever the initial allocations were there, which we all discussed in this group, if something is changing significantly, are we going to again, are we going to get that information, or are we going to discuss that for significant amounts only, like the same ones that Ivy was pointing out? For me, what stood out was G4A1 and G3A6, I suppose. No, something. There were like more than double or triple the amount of what was allocated and what was the actuals. So when that actual amount is going to be dispersed, are we even informed about that? And are we even doing the discussions?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go through the items then. And then what we can ask Marcus and Rais to share is where the expenditure change occurred because this committee decided that we wanted to allocate additional resources, and where at what point on other items that the district saw we were severely underspending in certain areas and they thought that they could allocate funds towards something that was still in line with LCAAC. And then how do we go from there? Because then this committee decides maybe we want to actually really increase our allocation because we like what the district ended up spending that money on, or no, we want to go back to what the original allocation was. So those are really good questions.
I do understand that our discussions happen at the beginning of the year, and over time, some new things might come up or some new expenditures might come up, and then we are changing the allocations. So during that time, are these questions even brought up with the committee, and did the committee even discuss huge items? I think Letty has something to say.
Yeah, so an answer to that is, so last year, Divya, we planned for the 2021 allocations. So we have a list that's the left-hand column that Marcus and Rais will bring to us next month that we built last year. And then they'll be able to share how we're doing so far on spending. And then the committee could have discussions as we did last year. Are there areas we want to spend additional funds? Letty?
Yeah, and I know we have some questions around the budget, and I completely get that, but I also want to kind of take a step back as to the purpose of our work, because otherwise we're going to get so into the numbers that we're not going to have time to really talk about the broad goals and actions. So just as a reminder, all of this work is tied to the 8 state priorities. Within these goals that this team and some of the, maybe there's some members that aren't here anymore, but certainly the board is looking to, is that within these 4 goals, this is really the work of the district with the supplemental funds. Last year was an unusual year. I think that's a really big point. But as we're going through this, I want you to kind of start to think about for the next 3-year cycle. What do we want to keep in mind? So I'm going to throw an example, like later on tonight, we're going to have a PBIS presentation where we have some funds allocated to professional development for teachers, to hourly pay. There's just a whole bunch that's tied to that because we know that under our goals, we have climate as increase of positive climate for students. So I know that that's something that we're committed to continuing, but as we go through these goals, kind of think about that. And then I'm going to try to keep note of questions as well as it relates to the budget.
Okay, so any very, very general questions before we start to go through these goals? I have Michael.
Mine was the comment about why we're here. I want to remind everyone that this budget, this money is from public funds, and only people who are elected by the public have the right to spend public money. So we're going to give advice, but it's elected officers that actually make the decision because it's public money, not ours.
Yeah, I understand that.
Michael.
Michael.
Oops, I'm sorry, Divya. I'm going to go to Crystal, and then Divya, did you still have a general question before we?
Yeah, general question actually. So I understand that LCAAC is an advisory committee only, and we do not control the actual spending. However, are we, again, this is a question which I'm not aware about how it functions. Are we even doing quarterly or semi-annual look back at whatever we have decided versus what's happening actually? Or do we get that update after everything is done and during the next year only? So we do a discussion today. Is it only after 12 months that we look at it, or do we have some provisions in place where we are even monitoring? I'm not saying that we are controlling, but maybe we should have a passive information or a way to even approve the spending.
So I'm sorry, I wasn't clear earlier. Next month, Marcus and Rais will come back, and then they will be talking about the 2021 expenditures, and they'll give us an update about how much that we've spent on those various goals and actions. And then the committee can talk about how we might want to reallocate some amount of funding that Marcus and Rais are telling from the fiscal business side they know is not going to get spent. And this is another year, as Rais said, of extraordinary circumstances. So we're going to do the best we can to get the funds to students who need it. But yes, Divya, so this is one portion where we look at the entirety of last year's expenditures. But we also, just like we did last spring, we have a report on the current year and how that year has gone and what we may do in the spring or summer to try to expend the rest of the funds if they haven't been able to be spent down in the way that we had previously allocated. So we are trying to do both of those things. Good questions. Crystal? Oops. Oh, you're muted. Oops, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I don't know if my question's answerable yet, but I just kind of wonder if broadly there's maybe an emerging sense of how COVID's going to impact things for the coming school year, given what we've seen this year, as far as things being up in the air with, are we going to continue with distance learning? Is there going to be more of a hybrid model? And then how is that going to affect these line items? And obviously some more than others, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's a good question, Crystal. And we'll have Marcus and Rais, as they go through what we've spent last year, if they notice that something in the spring really was not able to be spent because of distance learning, that's a really good piece of information. And then we can expect similarly that happened this year as well.
Got it.
All right, so we're going to go ahead now and start on our goals and actions. First, the one note I'm hoping we have an answer to on, some numbers are noted and some aren't. Are the deleted numbers, because we start with 2, for example, is it because 1 was an action we no longer have as part of LCAP, or was it that 1, 3, 5 just don't have any money tied to them?
So my understanding, and I'll let the gentleman speak to it, but I wasn't here, I know, but that there was no money tied to it in those 2 circumstances that are there, or 3, because there's also the one that started with the immersion, and then there was some funding tied to it.
Okay. So Marcus, then we'll have you start us on 2, but we might then, Letty, need, when we look back at goals and actions, we might need to bring back the additional actions that are still there, even if they don't have any funding tied to them. So starting in that first section, there isn't anything that has a huge discrepancy, and they're kind of straightforward in their descriptions. The only thing I'm wondering on for technology, we did spend money on technology, Wi-Fi access, laptops, that sort of thing. And so some of that was through CARES dollars, some of it was through LCP, but the committee did not actually have to incorporate it into the LCAP in our 3-year plan. Is that, Marcus, does that summarize that the goal number 1 there?
Yeah, what you just explained is my understanding also.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any other questions about any of the actions in goal number 1? Their hand raised that I'm missing, right? Oh, there we go. Okay, Divya?
I'm not sure at what level we discuss this, but are we even discussing why some of the items are low in number, especially the professional development for instructional staff?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a worthwhile question, and it is kind of an ongoing question. And I think that if we believe that it's still worthwhile to be doing, then that will be a conversation we want to have when we, over the next couple months, solidify what our efforts will be on providing the professional development. And I think that that would be a good time to have that conversation. Been due to some of it might have been due to the pandemic, but actually I would think that it was easier for people to have attended virtual professional development. And looking at past years, we generally have underspent in professional development. So, so PBIS will be a good kind of way to segue into the types of professional development that this committee can support. But other questions then on goal number 1. Anne?
Just a couple things, because I saw the same as Divya. But that first column is the budgeted amount. We anticipated that this many teachers were going to go. We have those of us who do the groundwork with this every day, we have a guesstimated sort of budgeting amount that a sub would cost. Some subs are more expensive because they're long-time retired teachers. Some have a different kind of credential. They're a little less expensive. So you have to use that average. You have to make that guesstimate. Professional developments, teachers leaving their classroom to do that kind of thing pretty well stopped mid-February. And a lot of the programs like the GLAD acquisition are multi-step trainings. And bless our teachers, they all stopped and stayed with their kids in a virtual classroom. So there are some discrepancies because, again, this is all information that's final as of last June 30th. Are we going to see weirdness in this year? Yeah. But everything's weird for this year's budget. So, but that might help Divya and some of the other committee members kind of understand. That first column is what the plan was and the budgeted amount. And then when the year got strange, the actuals didn't hold up.
Thank you, Anne. Michael?
Yes, it's regarding A2 and induction to retain highly qualified teachers. I understand that's a program to finish the credential for new teachers, and I'm curious how COVID has affected the supply of new teachers.
We actually we have less vacant positions, and we had less new educators needing to be in induction, as far as I understand. Letty, did you want to add more to that?
Yes, and I met with Heidi Beck, and what I'm also hearing is that colleges and universities also lengthen the time that a person, in terms of just because of access and all of that. So I know that there's a different need within induction. This also speaks to the stipends, the coaching stipends for folks, and also paying for some of our teachers on special assignment that work in induction.
I just know that with the new batch of teachers coming in who were trained in the credential program through virtual instruction are going to have unforeseen needs. And so that's just one of the things we kind of keep a pin on, because we'll have a teacher come in who is literally with a credential that has never been in an actual classroom. And so when we're thinking about induction, we're going to want to think about ways to make sure that our new teachers are successful so that we don't lose them after 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Divya, did you have another question on goal 1?
Yes. So again, I'm not sure if it's the right forum that I'm bringing it up. Regarding the teacher development and the qualified teacher thing. So first thing is it something that is voluntary for the teachers to take, or is it mandatory? Uh, just by seeing that the numbers are down. The second item is earlier, again during regular times, there used to be a day off for the teachers for undergoing these trainings, and then the subs used to take care of the classes and all. Given that now the instruction is virtual and that the teachers are spending less time interacting directly with the students. I do understand that the teachers will be spending the rest of the time in preparing the material for the students, but since there is uh, like non-direct time that the teachers are using, are we considering that we provide this training during the non-instructional time during regular days?
Yeah, so I could speak to that, Victoria, if that's okay. So this is mandatory. So what happened is that a few years ago, colleges and universities passed on the full credentialing process to school districts. And so school districts took on the added work of supporting our new teachers and fully giving, supporting them as their process through a credential. So this is not like a one-time workshop that they would do outside of class. This is actually a process that takes over a year to go through year one, and it actually takes them 2 years to go through induction. So it's rich, wonderful professional development, but our new teachers do need this 2-year support that now that college and universities used to do, and now school districts do. So although a specific non-school day could support it, it's really a 2-year long process that teachers also do after hours. They observe each other. It's during the day, it's after school. It is a pretty lengthy process.
And then the other part of that, Divya, the PAR is peer assistance review. And sometimes that is voluntary and sometimes it is involuntary. So when there are teachers, like when I was at Irvington, I taught math, but I was placed in a science classroom. I actually volunteered myself for PAR so that I could have one of our helpers make sure that my environment was conducive to student learning with the setup that I had. So I volunteered myself. We also have teachers that are identified that need additional assistance by their administrator, and through the evaluation process, they are mandated to then get that assistance. So it does have both elements in that. Okay, I think that is it then on goal 1. The only thing I wanted to bring up to flag for another time when we go for next year for technology, given what we are looking at, and kind of circling back to what Crystal was talking about, I think that we have identified in the year 2021, we have our unduplicated students that are really going to need ongoing technology in order to fully access curriculum. And whether that is because we're still in hybrid for next year, or they opt to do distance learning, or they're just a 9th grader and it's 2021 without adequate Wi-Fi and a netbook at home, we're doing our students, I think, a disservice. So I am going to ask the committee to look at that for updating next year's. Was there any other item that the committee wanted to flag for us to maybe make some significant changes moving forward? Okay, if it comes to you later, that's totally fine too. This is just a first pass. It's just that now it's kind of fresh in your mind because you're hearing what the money is being spent on. All right, so moving on now to goal number 2. I think that there were a couple items there that had larger discrepancies. So I'll speak to what I can on them and then have Marcus or Rais fill in. So we did talk quite a bit about the teacher, on the teacher leaders, and Brian was able to speak quite a bit on that. That's within line for what the budget was. The assessment system, which Steve spoke quite a bit about, that we approved, that's in line with our spending. The immersion programs, if we can hear, I think that was something we decided. So that's my recollection of that, is that we actually discussed the picking up some of the cost for our dual immersion programs because we serve English language learners, and a lot of our students through our immersion program become fully bilingual through those programs, and actually turning that English learner status into a huge strength and benefit. So that was a cost that we decided to bear. I'm wondering, Marcus, if you're able to speak on 3 and 5, because those were kind of the only discrepancies there that might be more substantial than what we were expecting. But library has also been something that's come to us a couple times in the spring that we do add on some additional funding for. And then Marcus, on 3, I believe those are instructional coaches. Marcus, Letty, if you were able to speak on that.
Yes, those are instructional coaches.
Letty, are you speaking on these?
Yeah, I was just saying that to clarify. So yes, I'm affirming that those are instructional coaches.
So Marcus, we may have had some vacancies in the instructional coach positions at the district office. And so I think that might be why these were underspent, if I'm recalling correctly. So we might have intended for some of this to get spent on salary, but if we are not able to fill the position, then the district still has that additional funding there. Marcus, is there anything else you think on that one?
No.
I don't know if you or Rais wanted to speak a little bit on any changes in Title I funding, because I know that we have not only instructional coaches funded through LCAP, but because of changing demographics, we're also receiving a lowered amount of Title I funds. Would you advise then that our allocations for A3, G2A3 remain at a lowered amount of about the 900,000 moving forward?
Yeah, Rice, did you want to comment on that?
So Victoria, you're asking in relation to Title I funds, right?
So I know that we had lowered amount for Title I funds, but those are separate from instructional coaches we would be funding, right? But is there any other reason that we might have a reduced number of instructional coaches for this upcoming year?
I don't think we have reduced the number of instructional coaches for the coming year or this year. That's not the reason. But we did realign our LCAP plans based on reduced Title I funds. And I just want to point out one thing, that there's a huge active engagement between us and instructional services. And I know Christy Rocha is not here in this meeting today, but we constantly work with each other to come up with the cost estimates and revise them as time goes on. When title funds were reduced mid-year, we worked very closely to actually come up with the new cost estimates for everything, including instructional coaches.
Okay. All right, is there anything under goal 2 that we might want to look into more? Yen?
I don't know exactly if it ties into goal 2 and part 3, and maybe circle back to technology, but for our English learners, they have their assessments, and I guess this month or coming up month is their assessment, and this is basically, online, which is different. We had a hybrid the year before, but this year it's, all online. Some of the support staff, their instruction, because they have to cover the testing. So, that might be something that we have to kind of think about. We're trying to enhance and give all the students the best opportunity. And not all the students are testing every day, they're or every week. They're just basically waiting for their turn because of the lack of staff. So I just want to kind of bring that up. And then again, they talk about maybe having a Chromebook to be ensured that they can basically participate in the state test and meet all the state criteria. So it goes back to, do we really have enough technology if we're going in the March timeframe for the English learners to get Chromebooks? And it's not picked up for the rest of the year. It's only picked up only for this assessment period. So just some thoughts. Another one is, maybe I'll just bring it up now. It doesn't necessarily cover this goal too, but I know that for some of the sites, we don't have the English learner support staff. And so, when we go online, it really kind of becomes more clear. If we have an English learner at another school that doesn't have support staff, can they participate in the resources? I mean, they qualify, but they're not participating, having that teacher or tutor assigned. And yet they're still participating in the assessment. So, when you come to it, it looks like it's not being fair to the student or the parents.
Right. Yeah, and you bring up a good point. When we allocate funding for certain resources, we have concentrations of students at individual schools, and then that can trigger a threshold. Or do we take funds and give everyone some sort of minimal amount so that we have those access? Or is there a way to have some resources done by a cluster of schools or something, if we continue distance learning, so that students can get that push in regardless? Or I could do a small group, and that might be all third graders among 3 schools at 10:15 a.m. and it might not necessarily need to be something where they're only at the designated schools. So I think that's it's something to consider, because you're right. Even if there's 2 kids at one school, it's not 30 where I might have another school, but then they're receiving none of those services.
Yeah, and I also understand that the English learner support staff, the actual assigned instructor, is not able to provide all the tests. There's not enough time, and so they basically have to pull other teacher resources to come in and assist. So I don't exactly know how that is being tracked or is just being volunteered, but I'm just concerned that the teachers are being asked to do extraordinary stuff which they really care about, but they're not being fully supported through funding.
Okay. And I think, Yen, you're talking about the LCAAC testing, right?
Yes,
that
that's
we're doing right now. Yeah. So then are we sacrificing a lot of instruction for all kids to have them trying to get through a lot of that testing? So, okay. Divya? Divya, did you have?
Yeah, mine is a very basic question. This is for goal A6. Is it that this has gone into negative amount and we were using the overages, the one in the parenthesis?
So Marcus, this is where the accounting answer. So does this actually, we not only didn't spend any money on that last year, but we actually over accounted the previous year for what had been spent? How did we get a negative there?
Well, I'm not sure why it's a negative there. So we'll talk to our budget director, because I'm not quite sure why it would be a negative there. Maybe it's something I'm missing there. Rice, are you able to comment on that, Rice? G2A6. I think he said he had to make a phone call.
Okay.
We can come back to that. Yeah, we can come back to that.
We can certainly come back to it. And it's a smaller dollar amount, but I think that certainly if we're looking forward, do we even need to budget for it? So Divya's question stands. If we're not going to spend it, then maybe we don't allocate for it. Thank you, Divya. Brian?
That was my question, just about A6. What is it, and is it a recurring cost, or was it just a one-time thing to provide a little bit more information of what exactly was A6 and what did it look like at the middle schools?
Okay, excellent. So I think we can reserve that then for the next meeting too, but so we'll tag that one for further discussion. All right, excellent. So we're going to move on now to goal 3. So we've already currently we've discontinued AVID. So for A1, that's no longer going to be funded out of LCAP. Then for the other items, I want to go to A10 because that was brought up. That's the most kind of significant discrepancy in this area. We had previously said for our allocations that we were funding half. Oh, I'm so sorry. Would you be able to mute if you're not? Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. So we had previously said we were going to fund 4 program specialists and 28% of psychologists. So that's the note that we have, and I think that was the amount that it was previously designated. Marcus, do you have an idea on A10 how we got, you know, that additional $1.2 million, and how we decide, because we want to be, you know, we had arrived through the discussion of special education that we do have a, you know, a certain percentage of our students that then we could use LCAP funding, but it has been brought up before, if our special education students they're entitled to certain services regardless. So spending all of LCAP money to just provide services to special students in special education, we want to be a little bit cognizant on that. But did you know specifically on that $1.2 million?
So on that one, I would have to research that, but I'm not sure if Mr. Abbasi knows the answer right offhand for that difference, Victoria. Rice, are you back on the line? Are you back on the call, Rice?
Okay, so we'll flag that one too then, Marcus.
Yeah, I wrote both of those down.
Okay, awesome. Ivy?
Just to add on to G3810, the original allocation was $1.89 million, and the unaudited actual is 1.9 million. So that was closer, but then we changed it to $700,000. So I don't know why we changed it, and then we actually spent close to what we planned on. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good note. So maybe the 1.89 actually is what the 4 program specialists and 28% of psychologists cost, but we got this 708 number here instead, and that might make more sense, Ivy. So
right.
We'll come back to that too, because then the committee can discuss if that's still an appropriate amount. For what I would ask, I would like to see a little bit more of coming back to us, because MTSS is so important, and I think a direction that we're moving in. I'd love to have a short presentation on MTSS for this committee moving forward. Is there anything else specifically on goal 3 that we want to come back to?
I'd like an evaluation of how the homeless specialist on A9, the resource to support homeless specialists, how that's being done. Is it being successful? Because that's one of the key areas of unduplicated students. So I would want, when we have time, to get a more specific report on that funding.
Okay, so not only a breakdown, Michael, of what that 143,000 was, but then actually what metrics are we using? Okay, excellent. And then I saw Nishi's hand.
Yeah, I just had a question about A7, because I think the PSAT wasn't able to be administered this year due to like COVID-19 restrictions, because A7 is referring to strictly like for 10th graders, and it normally happens in school, but it didn't happen this year. So I was just wondering what the money like they actually allocated was for, and Surf was actually talking about this earlier. And since like the PSAT, they had like a later date in January, but since it was canceled in January, which is still pretty recent, if the money hasn't been used for anything yet, is it possible for us to use it for resources and distribute them by the end of summer so that it's still available to like the UDPs to use to prepare for standardized testing?
Awesome questions, Nishi. So we're going to note that so that when it comes back to us next month, you should expect to see that money won't have been used for the 2021 school year, and we would still then be able to hopefully reallocate that. This is for last school year, and we also were underspent there despite it looks like administering it. But yes, we will see that again come back to us. Marcus, did you have something on that, or did you go back?
Well, I have some comments and I have a recommendation. Because as we've been going through this item, there's been a lot of background of phone calls and text messages between my finance staff and myself. We do not believe this information is correct, what you all are seeing. We would probably recommend that you pull this item from further discussion. This item, this particular spreadsheet, we not sure what happened, but something is this what I'm being told is that the numbers that are being reflected here are for the current year. And the items that were closed out for last year are on a different spreadsheet that are not on the screen. So that's why I've been going back and forth, with my staff trying to figure out, because folks are looking, I have finance folks that are looking at this, and they're like, well, we don't know what this is. This looks like the 2021, and somehow or another it got transposed. So Rice, do you have any comment on that? Because these are your staff folks that have been contacting us.
Yes, I spoke to David. He's our LCAP accountant for this thing. He said that on Thursday, we sent exactly similar spreadsheet for 1920. Today, he sent another spreadsheet for 2021 because I think there was a request to reflect 2021 exact same format. So it seems like those two spreadsheets are transposed, and that is creating this inaccuracy in presentation. So when I saw this spreadsheet, actually my jaw dropped because I was kept comparing this number to the numbers that I have, and I could not reconcile. So I kept calling my folks to see what exactly happened. And finally, a few minutes ago, David told me that he sent that information today for 2021 based on the request we had. But last Thursday, we sent exact same information for 1920.
Okay. Well, no worries. I think that I'm going to say over half of our discussion is useful regardless. So we will pick up on budget. We'll figure that out, and we will come back next meeting to kind of go through, and we'll decide whether we still want to go over what we think was last year's, or we need to just push forward and make some decisions on moving forward. But thank you, Marcus, for interrupting us there, because then we can stop and we can move on to agenda item 5. And now we have a good amount of time for our presentation on PBIS. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and invite Robin and Jenny that are here, and it's noted in your agenda. They're going to, just because we always straddle, it's so hard, we straddle multiple years, and we just had a practicum of how it's hard. But we are going to have the overview of what this committee approved funds on PBIS, and it is in action right now in our school district. So Robin and Jenny are going to share a bit about what's going on there. And then it'll help set the framework for how do we want to continue to fund LCAP with LCAP dollars. How do we see this continuing on in FUSD? How do we see it expanding? How much should we allocate to support our teachers that are doing with students in our schools? So
we have a hand raised, Victoria. Ivy Wu had her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, just really quickly. Okay, for Marcus and Rice, when you prepare the update for us, will LCP dollars be included in the spreadsheet somewhere? Or that will be a separate thing?
Ivy, let's work on that as a separate document, but I'm hearing you want that included, and I think that's great. But since it won't come out of the $16 million, it wouldn't go in the spreadsheet, but we'll ask for that. So that's a separate page that you can also reference it, because our committee had a hand in allocating those dollars as well. So then you can see where they went.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ivy. Robin, did you want me to project, or are you good to do that? How would you prefer to move along?
I think Letty's going to project for me.
I'm going to project for her. She's having.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us come this evening. My name is Robin Sturt. I'm the Director of Elementary Education. And tonight I have Jenny Applegren, who is a teacher at Oliveira. And almost, Jenny, I think it's about almost exact to the date, a year ago, we were here at LCAAC and sharing with you the work of PBIS. Jenny is here as a teacher because Oliveira really led the work in the district for many years, and we're going to have her share that experience. But I wanted to just set the foundation of what PBIS is and kind of the work that we would be doing at school sites. We had, as Victoria shared, we had come to LCAAC last year, and LCAAC was going to support us with funding to get started. With everything that transitioned in March, things changed a little bit. So this first year was actually funded through Title IV funds. And so we're looking to LCAAC to see if we can support the work for the next number of years. So I'm just going to dive right in. So PBIS is, as it says here, positive behavior interventions and supports. As our educational system steps up to this call for action towards not just equity, but justice, we must evaluate our policies and practices and strengthen our pedagogy to ensure it is equity-driven and culturally responsive. Our commitment towards equity and excellence is urgent and requires intentional and sustained action. PBIS is a framework to support the work towards this goal. PBIS is a three-tiered framework that guides selection, integration, and implementation of the best evidence-based behavioral practices for improving important behavior outcomes for students. It's a proactive approach rather than a disciplinary approach. We focus on prevention, not punishment. And at its heart, PBIS calls on schools to teach students positive behavior strategies, just as we would teach any other subject, like reading or math. PBIS recognizes that students can only meet behavioral expectations if we teach them what those expectations are. Everyone learns what's considered to be appropriate behavior and uses common language to talk about it. It's throughout the school day, at lunch, on the playground, and even in a virtual environment. Students understand what's expected of them. PBIS is not a curriculum that you purchase or something that you do in a one-day training professional development. It's a commitment to addressing student behavior through systems change. When we implement it and we implement it well, students achieve improved social and academic outcomes. And our schools experience reduced exclusionary discipline practices, and our school personnel feel more effective. So that's kind of a quick overview of it. If you go ahead and, sorry, Letty. But you can go ahead and go on to the next one. We're going to skip the video because I know we have short on time, but it is really, if you get an opportunity to look at the video, it gives you an overview of what PBIS looks like at a school site. And as I was sharing, it's a framework, it's not a curriculum, which is really what is exciting about PBIS. Is it's not a curriculum we're going to buy and you get a training on it and then we move on. PBIS is about shifting our instructional practices, and it is evidence and research driven. You can go ahead, Letty. The PBIS framework is really about looking at our systems, our data, and our practices. The systems piece of this is the way schools operate, or the foundational systems of looking at behaviors. The data piece is with PBIS, we collect data on how students are behaving in specific areas of the school during specific times of the day. And it helps us gain knowledge about what's happening in certain learning environments or what's happening in certain times of day and how to adjust that with our students. So PBIS within the heart of it is data driven. And then it really is about a focus on practices. What are we going to do in our day-to-day work to shift behavioral outcomes for students? You can go ahead. It is a three-tiered approach, as Victoria was talking about earlier, MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. PBIS also has the 3 tiers because it falls under MTSS for our behavioral model of interventions and support. Tier 1 is really the universal supports all students get. And so in this tier 1, 80% of our students, it's where we teach those expectations. What does it look like to be in the cafeteria? What are the expectations? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And we explicitly teach that to students rather than say, it's a cafeteria, sit quietly, you're not sitting quietly, and then we give a punishment. We teach explicitly what it looks like to sit quietly, what it feels like to sit quietly. So we really teach behavior expectations very explicitly. And 80% of our students, these lessons and expectations, the students are able to internalize those and meet those expectations. As in everything we do, we know that sometimes students might need an additional support. And so the tier 2 is for about 15% of our students who may need a little bit more structure or a little more interventions. A tier 2 support in PBIS is something called check-in, check-out. So our students, like now in our virtual environment, who are having trouble engaging, we have teachers checking in with them in the morning, and it's not their current teacher. It could be last year's teacher, it could be a custodian, it could be an office manager. I'm sure Anne might be checking in with some students. They check in with students in the morning, set the day's expectations, and then check in with them at the end of the day. So just a little more support to be able to be successful with their behaviors in the classroom. And then for some of our students, they might need even more intensive support, and that's that tier 3. But really the goal of all of this is that we minimize discipline and we minimize suspension, and we keep kids in the classroom learning, and we avoid removing them from their instructional learning time. Go ahead, Lenny. PBIS at its core really increases attendance. When students know what's expected to them of them, they know, what the day will look like. They know the consistency of things that are going to be asked of them on a daily basis, so they attend more often. And that we know if students are in the class learning and they're not sent out of the classroom for behavior or disruption, then their academic performance is going to increase as well. PBIS improves school culture because it's about a culture and climate on campus of being positive, rewarding students for positive behavior, finding ways for them to see that what they're doing is making a difference. It increases the sense of safety. And just really, as you all are hearing, the social emotional support that students feel when there's a safe learning environment is really at the core of the work that we want to do, because when students feel safe, then their behaviors are more appropriate and then their academics increase. What it does reduce is problem and bullying behavior. It decreases discipline referrals and suspensions. And it also decreases staff turnover, because when our staff feels part of the culture and climate, they want to stay where they are. Go ahead, Letty. All right, and so kind of at the heart of why PBIS is consistencies across all school sites. Every school site has really strong practices. Like I know Mr. Benvenides can talk about all the work his school has done with mindfulness and PLCs and really working on a lot of supports at their school site. Other school sites have different practices that they use. And so what we want to do is create consistency amongst all 28 elementary schools. And so when you walk on a campus, no matter what school you go to, you're going to see PBIS posters. You're going to see behavior expectations explicit for every school site. What those expectations are going to be different depending on the site and what their needs are, but you're going to see similarities across all schools, which will help our students who are overflowed to one site and then go to another site. They're going to see that same expectations being taught at all the school sites. There's going to be clear expectations for students and staff. I think Jenny probably can speak to this, but it really helps the staff as well when we know what the clear expectations are of when you're in the library, what are the behavior expectations, and we can all hold true to those and have the same clear message to the students. As I said, you're going to see expectations at all 28 schools by the time we roll out the entire plan, because you'll see these big posters across all of the schools with what the posted expectations are. Students will build connections, especially our students who are more at risk when we have those check-in, check-out opportunities. And it'll be an opportunity for us to connect with our community. Go ahead, Lenny. And really, so this is old data because we know the dashboard is having its its own year of fun. And so when Jenny and I put together this presentation, we were looking at chronic absenteeism just to show that there is a need to engage our students. I would say this year, this would look very different because we are seeing that our students are attending class every day. We still have some work with our engagement, but I think overall, we have a really high percentage of our students engaged. So that's why we kept in this old data, because it's the in-person data and where we would need to move as a district as well. You can go ahead. And then suspension rates. And I'm actually going to have you go to the next one. And again, this is old data. I don't know if Mr. Musto, I don't know if you have new data on suspensions that you want to share with us.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't really, nothing, well, I could project it, I guess. No, you're already projecting, never mind. So real quick, as this, we did a report this year due to all the issues of data at the state level. We had to do some manual reporting that we usually don't do. And one of those is on suspension, categorizing every suspension that was done last year. It was interesting to do, to learn about, because of the elementary schools in particular, 3 of the 5 attendance areas had less than 10 suspensions within the entire attendance area. So Kennedy only had 5 suspensions, Mission area elementary schools had 5, and Washington had 6. This really stood out. You can see on here that was, it's inconsistent. And when I questioned the principals about it, Mr. Benavides is here, it was the Kennedy attendance areas I spoke with. I said, wow, this is really impressive. Is that coincidental? And the response was pretty unanimous. It was absolutely not coincidental. It was due to the work of not necessarily PBIS, but interventions done by school staff. That is the principal. Those are the counselors that are available, and those are the teachers. If you want to reduce suspension numbers, there's actually a pretty easy formula for doing it, but it requires a lot of staffing time. But it's nice to see that our school leaders and our school staff are putting in that time and seeing the results. So this is it's a real positive trend, and one I'm happy to share at any point to where we're going.
Thank you, Mr. Musto. And just along those lines, it's really, I think we have made a really good and great gains in the area of reducing suspensions. And then the next step is reducing time out of class, right? And so that's with every attainment of a goal, I think we dig a little deeper. And so our next work is really trying to figure out how students are building strategies so students aren't removed from the classroom as well. You can go ahead. All right, so I'm going to ask Jenny to jump in because Olivera started this work with PBIS, is it 4 or 5 years ago, Jenny?
In 2017.
Okay, there you go. And she will share with you their journey and then kind of how it merged with this opportunity to bring it with the entire district. So go ahead, Jenny.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I've been lucky enough to be an Olivera educator for the past 10 years. I started as a 5-6 grade SDC teacher, so in a special education class, and after that, have now spent the last 5 years in a 4th grade classroom. So in my experience of being a special educator, I certainly started to see some patterns or started to see some concerns about behavior and things that I wanted to fix. And in 2017, we had a unique opportunity at Olivera where we had an increased enrollment by 30%. We had a lot of new staff and a lot of new students. And Letty, I'm so sorry for all the all the animation in my PowerPoint here. So just keep it rolling and I'll catch up. We had increased enrollment by 30%, new staff, and we had a new administration as well. And with that, we had a lot of inconsistencies amongst staff, understandably, because we had a lot of new staff members. We had a huge shift in climate. We had a lot of kids that were brand new to Oliveira that had never been to our school before. And then we really saw this opportunity for us as a staff to make a change. And so that's what we decided to do when we decided to launch PBIS at our site. You can keep going. Thank you. So we decided to survey our students before PBIS started. The playground was definitely a place where we had a lot of kids that a lot of things were happening that were not consistent, right? We had different types of behaviors happening on the playground, different staff enforcing different rules. And so just the one thing I want to point out to you here is this green section on the graph. 44% of our students said that they feel safe on the playground, which we want all of our kids to feel safe all of the time at school, right? So this was before the implementation of PBIS. After 1 year, 87% of our students then said that they felt safe. And this is, our students are taking this survey and self-reporting this. So for us, that was definitely a big win after just 1 year of implementation. In 2017, 30% of students reported that teachers, administrators, yard duties, and school staff did not have the same expectation for them. We were able to reduce that. So by 2018, only 17% of students agreed with that. And again, this is older data, but we've updated even more since then. So the way that we implemented this is those school-wide behavioral expectations that Robin was talking about usually show up in the form of a matrix that you can see here. So we identify different school zones, and then we create a matrix based on our different school-wide expectations, which are all positively framed. So I know when we were going to schools, I know a lot of us are used to rule posters that say, know this, know that, and we're certainly moving away from that. So our rules at Oliveira is that we will be safe, on task, act responsibly, and show respect. So we soar like our friend Ollie the Eagle. So these two posters you see throughout our school campus. Do you want me to just present? I can do it. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So here's just another look at our matrix, and you can just click a few times to make everything show up there. The way that these come out is that we have expectations are really clearly and positively stated. So I know that this is too small for you to be able to read, but it never says something like, I do not, or we will not. It states exactly clearly what the students will do. And then we also identified voice levels, which are used all across our campus. So from everywhere, from the school cafeteria to a school assembly, they know the expected voice level. And then we also have specialists and classroom teachers create their own matrix using the same SOAR language. And they also, whenever anybody comes onto our campus, it's clearly posted, whether it's a guest teacher, a guest staff member, they know immediately that they can reference the school-wide expectations. And then one of the things that we've really seen as a win in implementing PBIS is we have a lot of increased community and parent involvement. So we've really partnered with the parents at our site to continue the PBIS conversation. This is an example of a flyer we send home so that families are aware of what our behavioral expectations are and how they can implement more positive type of parenting in their home. We also have our school counselor as part of our PBIS team. And she, of course, is such a wonderful resource that provides parenting workshops as well. And then we also have parents come in to help run what we call Ollie's Outpost, our student store, our reward store. So parents get to come and celebrate with their students as they give out the rewards that the students have earned. I won't play these for you. I know they're linked for you, but here's some student interviews of what they got at the store. And you'll see a lot of them have these coupons in their hands. We know that kids like things, right? But kids also like, they like privileges. And so one thing we've really tried to do is move towards increasing privileges by selling these kinds of coupons that allow them to do things like sit in the teacher's chair or take their shoes off in class, things that are really zero cost to us as a site that the kids really enjoy. So there are some common misconceptions about PBIS, and I wanted to share with you what we learned along the way. One common misconception is that teachers won't want to do something new. And what we learned here, if you can just keep clicking, there we go, is that when teachers are leaders, they have the say and they feel supported, then they will want to do something new. So this PBIS team was started with a team of educators that took the lead, and our administration has been incredibly supportive and part of that team ongoing, but it definitely was a community-based decision. Another misconception is that PBIS is just fluff and it makes it hard to be effective disciplinarians. But that also is not true. It requires teams to clearly define systems of support, including a continuum of response to misbehavior and intervention strategies. Other common misconceptions are that the good kids, so-called good kids, are the only ones that are going to be rewarded and nothing will change for other kids. But PBIS really puts systems in place for all students, even our students that require additional support. And then there's always that concern about giving students stuff and that we're just bribing students. But it really is. And as we've learned, especially as we've continued PBIS in the distance learning environment, that it's really less about the things and more about the process. And then again, we had our store. That can be expensive and time consuming. And it certainly can be, or it can be free and fast. And then there's the misconception that PBIS is just another program or just another curriculum. And I think, like Robin's already stated, it's not that. It's not something that you do. It's something that you buy. It's not something that you do. I'm all backwards. It's not something that you buy. It is something that you do. It's been a long day of Zoom, y'all. Sorry. But it really is about supporting a system of change and promoting a climate change at school sites. So something that we've been doing as we've moved forward in our PBIS journey is we've really worked on strengthening our two-tier intervention. So we've started in the distance learning environment, the check and check out program, like Robin has stated. We also have worked on doing group fun lunches and bringing in other support staff in order to run kind of small group interventions. We also are looking for better tracking systems and also really looking to have paid trainings for all staff, because it's not just teachers that are responsible for the climate on campus, right? It's all of our school staff. So I'm going to pass it back to Robin.
Thank you, Jenny. And I know we're short on time, so I'm going to quickly just go through the rest of this. And really the rest is the implementation plan and what the training looks like for PBIS. We are working this year with the Santa Clara County Office of Education, and they have a really strong PBIS program. It's tried and true with many districts. And so that's why we chose to work with them in collaboration. We currently have 6 schools that are going through the PBIS training this year. And what the training entails is in year 1, what I really like about PBIS is year 1 is a planning year. It's an opportunity for the PBIS team to plan the work that they're going to implement the following year. And so year 2 is actually year 1 because it's the implementation year. And then year 3 is when you get into more of the tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. So the training that we would receive from Santa Clara County Office is a 3-year ongoing training, and it's 4 days a year. Although this year, our 6 schools that are in year 1, it's been about, I think it'll be total 8 after school sessions rather than a full day of being released from the classroom. We are doing virtual sessions outside of the school day, and then teachers are receiving their additional pay for that. So for our 28 schools to go through this process, you can see it's going to take a number of years to everybody get to full implementation, but it is a well thought out training model that we would follow to the T for all 3 years and make sure everybody got the full training. You can go ahead, Letty. The hope was that, so really with PBIS, you should have a 0.2 FTE, which is full-time person or coach per site that is implementing PBIS. With the change in the world last year, we were not able to add a coach. So I've been serving in that role this year, and I am helping to support the 6 schools who are in their planning year, and then working with Olivera, because Olivera's in their principal and myself attend a coaches training, and we come back to Olivera and provide that training to their PBIS team. And then once we have it fully implemented, we would have a leadership team at the district, so liaisons from every school site myself, as well as the Director of Curriculum Instruction, the Director of Student Support Services, and we meet quarterly to check in on our progress of the implementation of PBIS. So year one, for the other piece about PBIS, it's relatively inexpensive. It's $42.50 per school site, and you can take as many people as you would like to the training. We have, as a district, we are able to support subs in this cost. In the plan that I've shared with you, 5 subs per school site. And then we've also allocated materials and supplies for those matrices that you saw, like Jenny was sharing. So this first year with our 6 schools in Oliveira, it was at $71,500. Depending on the hourly, we're still working out those details, but it will not exceed that amount. And currently this year was paid out of Title IV dollars. You can go ahead, Letty. Because we know that the urgency of our work, and we know that we need to get these practices in place now, and the timing is ripe to do this work as we shift from virtual environments to possibly being back on site and supporting our students' needs with a positive culture. We are going to start a cohort 2, hopefully, if we have the support financially. You can go back to the second one. There we go. Cohort 2 this summer. They'll have, when we have 5 schools who are signed up for that, they would do 2 sessions in June and 2 sessions in August. And then that would be their year 1. And then go ahead, Letty. It gets a bit confusing, year 1s, year 2s, and then we would have 8 more schools start in the fall, and then 8 more schools start next spring. So we're sort of truncating the process, but Santa Clara County office is willing to work with us and speed up the process for us to get as many sites trained as possible, so we can really move through these 3 years of training and get full implementation at all of our sites. You can go ahead, Letty. And then the next ones are just the following years, because it's, as I said, it's a 3-year plan for every school site. You can go ahead. And I just gave you the breakdown year by year. Go ahead. So the total cost over, I think it's 4 or 5 years of training is about a little over $800,000, but it would get all 28 schools trained in PBIS and have them completely supported. As I said, I would be the coach for all of the school sites. Eventually, if times get better, we might be able to get coaches, additional coaches, but for now I will serve in that role. And then we go through different processes where we use data. Sites do a self-assessment, and the end of the year, I would do an assessment walking through the school and talking with students and see how we're doing with our PBIS goals, and then make adjustments with the team from year to year. This is the best slide ever, but I'm going to let Jenny share it, because when she shared it with me and from the training, it really kind of hit home on why our work is so important and why we need PBIS now.
Yes, I think that we sometimes assume that everybody or all students understand kind of what's expected from them. But when we take the time to actually teach like we would other subjects, we see a lot more success. So if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, why can't we finish the last sentences automatically as we do the others? And so with PBIS, the hope is that we're really helping kids to learn and understand how to have a successful time at school with their peers and with their teachers. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to ask actually if one or both of you would be willing, when we get down to planning for incorporating PBIS into the multi-year plan. We'll take a couple maybe quick questions right now, but I would love to have you, not to present again, this was fabulous, but we really would love to have you on hand to see how this fits in to our multi-year plan, if that's okay. But if we do have a couple quicker questions that we want to get through, then let's do that now. I'll start with Trustee Jones.
I just want to say that I'm so glad to see this. I think one of the challenges that I have as a trustee is that when we get suspensions, almost invariably we look at the records of those students and see that this kid didn't end up in this space out of nowhere. And when you look back, you see places along the way where it was like, oh man, if we had only done something differently here or here. And it really almost always goes back to elementary school. And so I feel like this kind of investment at this level, it doesn't just pay off for elementary school students, it pays off at every level. And it really, I'm hoping someday I'm not getting suspensions. And that, I'm not left feeling like, man, there's no choice here, or feeling like, oh, we could have and should have done something differently at this point, 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm just very excited to see this, and really happy, Jenny, that you've seen the real impact of this at Oliveira and so quickly. So I'm excited.
Thank you, Diane. Anna?
Thank you. If I'm allowed to ask, and I don't know if I am, what are the 6 other schools, if they've already been chosen, to participate next?
Yeah, so the 6 schools that are currently receiving training. So what principals did is they went back and shared the PBIS, like an overview to their sites, and really talked to their sites about when are we ready to jump on the cohorts. So they worked with their staffs and really decided when was the right timing for their schools. And Mr. Benavides, not to put you on the spot, but you could share kind of what you did with your site. But the 6 current schools this year are Parkmont, I'm gonna have to think of it, Parkmont, Ardenwood, Patterson, Hirsch, Grimmer, and Vallejo Mill.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know, Mr. Benavides, if you want to share how you guys decided. It's up to you. You don't have to.
Just real quickly, I brought it to my staff. We had a discussion. We're really into our academic interventions right now, so we wanted to focus that and get that under our belt, and then we're going to introduce PBIS, which is why we are excited that we're going to be starting in June and then the August session. So it's all depending on where the staff is and whether they're ready for it or not.
Michael?
I just want to back up all the positive things I've said and look forward to learning more and supporting this program. The next time we meet, don't everything now, I would like to hear how the transition to middle school is implemented in it, because it could be we teach all kids to hold hands and we throw them in middle school and then it's Lord of the Flies. So, and we do have to start somewhere. So like, it's okay if we don't have anything yet, but I'm seeing past us doing this towards us doing the next steps too.
Awesome, thank you. Ivy?
Thank you for the presentation. So how are the schools, do the schools volunteer to join this program, or how are they picked? So they signed up for the participate?
Yeah, so they signed up for which cohort? So we are asking that all 28 elementary schools participate, because we want that consistency across the entire district.
Mhm.
They had the choice on which cohort they wanted to be part of. And so, yeah.
Thank you. And then also another question, the survey, the student survey that you showed was on the playground. And is that the only survey that you do, the students' response, on the playground, or is it like, I mean, how can you measure the effectiveness?
Yeah, I think, Ivy, this year we survey the kids a lot and they're getting used to that, especially in this virtual environment. And I know Oliveira surveyed students in a variety of the environments. I know that Glenmore is doing a social emotional check-in with students in the morning as a survey. So we have a variety of tools that we can utilize to check in on different aspects of the climate of the school.
So Glenmore is one of the 6 schools?
No, Glenmore is joining us in the summer, but Glenmore has already done some work with social emotional. They've been doing a lot of work with social emotional support, but they do have a tool to check in with students in the morning as well. And I know Olivera has the same tool. A lot of their teachers are doing a check-in in the morning. And I would guess that that's across the district, not just at our sites that are utilizing PBIS.
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, we when we started in 2017, the spring of 2017 in planning, we decided to survey our students via Google Forms, and the younger ones with just a hand survey, and then compiled all that data. It was it was just a team of teachers kind of trying to figure out how to do it without a lot of tools available. But we did survey them a number of different questions. I just pulled out that specific question because that was a big problem area for us at our site, and we saw a big improvement because of PBIS.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Ivy. All right. So with that, I've been informed that Mr. Musto is graciously going to front load. Oops, I'm sorry, Divya. Go ahead.
Yeah, I raised my hand for a while. Maybe I missed in showing up
No,
there.
no.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Yeah, first of all, it's a great program. Yes, it is really beneficial for the students. In addition to the academic one, their behavior is something that needs to be helped with in multiple ways. So my questions are around my first question, the high suspension numbers in American versus mission. So are we doing some reports on why there is a difference, what we are doing to reduce the numbers, and any learnings from mission so that we could apply it in other schools, etc.?
Yeah, and I think Mr. Musto shared, we've seen improvements in all of our attendance areas. And so as he shared, we're getting to the heart of kind of the why, what are our successes and what strategies have been put into place. And as he shared, looking at the support students are getting, I think we're digging deeper into what's the cause of the behavior versus just a reaction to the behavior.
Okay, so right now, since the instruction is online, are we even considering this PBIS program for online bullying versus the way the students are behaving in the classrooms with the teacher? Of course, it gets difficult for us to track, but off of the instruction area too, there are instances where these are perceived.
Yeah, so we're the 6 schools that are getting training this year are doing a lot of work on behavior matrices for distance learning, but we're also creating those for in person and what are going to be the expectations when we are back on campus. And so the training is looking at both environments for our students.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to really quick about the conversation about the data and the suspension rates. One thing with PBIS is that it is very important to collect and analyze data. And with PBIS comes a program to be able to do that. And it's something that we are significantly lacking right now. And we need to be looking at data across the school board, who is getting suspended, when are they getting suspended, and why. And so having that piece would be really important. And then to answer the question about distance learning, like everything, we all had to turn on a dime very quickly when the world changed. And our PBIS team in the beginning of the year developed a distance learning matrix and some lessons for teachers to implement at the beginning of the year of online safety and online behavior. And so I guess maybe we're the only team that was up and running at that point, but it's certainly something that we look to address across the board.
Yes, so I want to just share too on the data piece, because we were looking to utilize Swiss, so that's part of the planning for every school site. Swiss is a tool to collect data specifically for behavior, but now with our new student information system, Infinite Campus, they may offer something already in that program that is not a cost. So that is something that we're going to look at as well. So we are utilizing the data either from Swiss or from Infinite Campus, but we definitely want to track, where our strengths are and what are our areas that we still need to reteach.
I hope the information that we are collecting is including teachers, students, and any other support staff too, right? Because it's not only the behavior of the students with each other, but it's the behavior in the class, outside, along with any other, including the library and other programs too.
Yes, and that's the really great thing about PBIS is it's a community focus. And so, we are talking with our custodians, we are talking with our office staff, we are connecting students with other adults on campus. And in the data collection, we're able to pinpoint, oh, look, we've seen an increase at lunchtime, on the monkey bars. What's happening over there? What more supervision do we need? What behaviors do we need to teach again? And so the data we're collecting is very specific and targeted.
Yeah, that's great. Another one regarding the PBIS enrollment, I do see that right now it's started at a limited level with some of the pilot schools that we are doing, and we plan to increase. But is it an all or none thing? Can we not start at a limited level for non-enrolled sites, update the school guidelines, etc., so that to some extent, whatever learnings we have got from the current pilot schools, why not implement at a limited level at the other schools? Again, it might not be the complete program, but updating the school guidelines, giving the rules and things to the teachers, passing on some information so that they use.
Right. So that's exactly what it actually isn't, is we're not passing on anything to teachers. The teachers develop it for their school culture. And that's why we can't just give a handbook, because it's not a curriculum. It really is about the team at the school site developing the matrices that are specific for their school site. And so it is important that we go through the training process and we have that full year of planning, because we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of each individual school site. And so we don't want to just it's not just about handing a document to them, it's about developing it and making it authentic for every school.
I understand, Robin. I mean, of course, the culture at different schools is different based on the environment that is there in those different sites. That would be different. But there would be some generic things that we would have learned, which could be implemented at other sites. Again, it could not be like a complete implementing portion, but maybe some guidelines could be shared with other schools which are not participating. Again, that would actually make those schools more interested in coming back to this program, right? So that they could enroll in future.
Robin, could you share a little? I think you had talked about, because PBIS there's a certain protocol which actually includes getting a consensus built at the site. I don't know if it would help a little bit to share about that again.
Yeah, and so year one is that planning year where you're creating your matrices and you're working with the staff. You're going back and forth between sessions on creating what those matrices look like. So the team brings it back to the school site and they make changes, and then they bring it back to their trainer. And so it is about having a lot of conversation and building and really taking the time to be thoughtful in what we roll out in the actual implementation year. And so it is important for us to follow the process and follow the training, because the research has showed if we just try to implement it without the training, it is not as successful. As I shared, we have a self-assessment survey that schools take at the beginning of the year, and then something called a tiered fidelity assessment we take at the end of the year. And that's the assessment that I would do for every site. And we compare, where have we grown over the year and what do we still need to work on? And so it's a really research-based rollout, and we have to hold true to that training, or what we see is that there isn't really the authentic buy-in and we don't move forward. We have a gap in the work that we're doing, and then it's not sustainable over time.
Yeah, maybe I'll agree to disagree. Actually, all or none thing is still not convincing to me. Maybe you can check back on it. I will really leave it to you. My final question, I need to go, but I just wanted to leave it with this. So that kids, whoever are participating in this program and the schools which are participating, are we tracking them as they go into other higher schools or other schools which are not part of this program, so that we don't lose on whatever learnings we have imparted to those kids? And also
right. And absolutely, we would collect that data. And I just want to be clear, like this, we are going to have all 28 schools trained by the end of next year. And that is almost unheard of in a district this size, to be able to train that many schools within a year. So we won't have that significant of a gap of students whose site has already implemented versus a site that has not. And so we will definitely use our data over the next number of years to see how PBIS is shifting the mindset at the school site and shifting the culture, and then building from there. But there will not be a significant gap from our first year of implementers to the final year. It will all happen within, within 1 year.
Thank you so much, Robin. All right, so thank you both very much, and thank you again in advance for a future meeting that we'll have you attend as we budget appropriately for PBIS. Mr. Musto is graciously going to prepare his overview to actually front load our next meeting. So we'll be able to have that conversation, and he'll share about the data and the input. So we'll be able to utilize that as we move forward on our March agenda. So we are actually going to close for this evening. So we are adjourned at 8:16. Thank you all so much.